Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Men for the Win is sponsored by the Gran Group with Edina Realty. Are you looking to purchase a new home in the Twin Cities area? Or perhaps you're trying to sell your current home? Whether you're upsizing or downsizing, the Gran Group with Edina Realty will meet all of your housing needs. Contact the Gran Group by emailing thegran, G-R-A-N, group at edinarealty.com or call them by phone at 612-817-8751. The Gran Group with Edina Realty, 3-time Minneapolis-St. Paul Magazine Super Agent Award winners. On this episode, David and Dan recap the Twins' 3-game series against the Detroit Tigers. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win. My name is David Kufis. With me, as always, is Dan Thompson. The Twins dropped 2 of 3 at Comerica Park. The last time these mighty, mighty Twins will see the mighty, mighty Tigers, but probably more important, Dan Thompson, the last time we'll see Miguel Cabrera.
That is kind of sad, right? In a way. I mean, I miss him at this stage of his career. I don't think I missed him about 10 years ago when he was mashing them for extra base hits to the opposite field and all that.
Well, and it's a little bit disappointing that really his retirement has been overshadowed by a few things. Like, obviously, the Aaron Judge thing, even more so. Albert Pujols, clearly. But like even further than that, just the fact that the Detroit season clearly hasn't gone as they'd hoped.
Yeah, you make actually a really good point about Pujols because he has gotten a lot of glory. I guess Cabrera got some early when he got his 3,000th hit, right? But then after that, it's like everybody's kind of done with Miguel Cabrera.
Yes. Well, and now Pujols at 702, Dan. You think that guy who's selling that 700 ball is, how much is that worth now, like you said?
I know. I'm telling you, you got to sell that when it's hot. And then it's going to be the 702, the 703, whatever he gets to. Maybe he gets one more, and then it's 703.
So I do have to say, folks, real quick, make a note. I apologize for Thursday. It was a rough go. I was in rough shape. You can probably still hear it in my voice a little bit. And Hogs had a sick kid, so he wasn't able to fill in. It was just a mess. So we thank you for your graciousness. Again, our apologies. We kind of pride ourselves on being a podcast that kicks out after every single Twin series. So the fact that we didn't do that, we always feel rough about that.
Yeah, I thought about a one-man show, and then I thought, I don't think I would even want to listen to that. So so we'll just go with that. But yes, and I guess we should mention very briefly in that series, the Twins actually won that series 2 games out of 3 against the White Sox. But then they lose 2 of 3 here against the Tigers. So they are now 2 games back from the White Sox for that that coveted second place in the AL Central. Twins are 77-82. So David, they are guaranteed a losing record this season after all that.
Quite disappointing. I mean, what a difference a couple of weeks makes, Dan, right?
Well, okay, I was thinking back to the beginning of the season. Even I think in the preview, you talked about how if the Twins played a really good April and into kind of the first half of May, like it was going to be an interesting season. And that was their best stretch of baseball all season.
Yeah.
And it did keep them relevant, until just a couple weeks ago. So you were right, Kufis, you were right.
To an extent, I do wish that the interest would have continued a little bit longer, Dan. But I guess I'm a little bit sad that I'm real excited that if they sweep the White Sox, they'll finish for second in the division.
I'll take that, though. I would love to have second. And I think that'd be right among my prediction here for their record this season, 80-82. So hopefully they can get that done and finish the season strong.
So we're going to do a recap, but a very brief one, folks, because we have a lot of things to talk about that aren't really specific to this series and things that, honestly, people are more interested to talk about. And honestly, Dan and I are more interested in talking about.
All right, well, let's go to it.
Series recap.
So game 1 real quick. This one looked, Dan, like the way we had hoped the Twins would always look. They win this one 7-0. They had 14 hits. Joe Ryan on the mound, continuing to further cement himself as a legitimate frontline starter next season for this team. He goes 6 innings pitched, only 5 hits given up, 1 walk, but 8 strikeouts, Dan. And the cool note about Joe Ryan now, he now holds the team record for rookie strikeouts by a Twins pitcher of 151 on the season.
Really remarkable season for him, especially because he dealt with COVID and he was kind of out early for a little stretch there, but he was, their most reliable starter, I think, without a doubt. I mean, Sonny Gray, I guess, is up there a bit too, though he missed some time, but bodes well for the future.
Yeah, I mean, they only went 4 for 15 with runners in scoring position, so they clearly had some more work that could have been done. The other thing I want to note, I texted you and Hogs, and I had said, if I sent you this message at the beginning of the season, Mark Contreras doubles in the top of the 3rd, Jermaine Palacios scores, would you have known which team it was if I didn't tell you who was playing?
Probably not, because you got to figure Royce Lewis would be up and playing before this guy named Jermaine Palacios, who went 3 for 5 in this game to improve his average to 129 on the season. So thank you, Jermaine, for really staying relevant here at the end of the season.
That's actually higher than his fielding percentage, I think.
Also, Ryan Jeffers had a triple, which, good on him for legging that out. The Twins, they get the 7-0 win. They even stole 2 bases. Jake Cave and Contreras got in on that. The Tigers looked like they were done.
Yeah, so the stolen base thing is interesting. Like, you would think the increased stolen bases would be solely based upon Billy Hamilton. But truly, Dan, Rocco is throwing caution to the wind now. He leaves his pitchers out there. He sends them on the base paths whenever he feels like it. I thought Rocco was loose when the games mattered. But turns out, Dan, this is a whole new level of looseness we've seen from Rocco.
I know they had 3 stolen bases in this series, and the Tigers, I think, only had 1. Go figure. But I think the Tigers were the one team that steals just about as little as the Twins do. Go figure.
Well, let's go to game 2. Twins lose this one 3-2. Dylan Bundy's probably last start as a Twin, I would imagine. He goes 5 innings pitched, 2 earned runs, 3 strikeouts, and a home run, putting his season ERA at 4.89. Again, myself, as a Dylan Bundy defender, I, of course, think this is a great line.
It is right there with that ERA, right around 4. Henriquez came in, though, and pitched 3 innings. He's looked really quite good here over his last couple outings. 3 strikeouts, 1 hit, 1 run, not even earned.
There was one play where Arraez was credited with an error as Henriquez was trying to cover first base, and Arraez threw it just a little bit ahead of Henriquez, but I truly think had he been watching the ball and not looking for the base, I think he could have extended his arm to get the catch. So it was a little bit of a bummer that Arraez got credited with the error.
Those plays are a little bit harder than they look, and it's hard to kind of know who really deserves the blame as to, whether who's in position and not. The Twins do have their chances kind of later in this game to tie this up. I'm going to talk about one a little bit. They go 1 for 7 with runners in scoring position, leave 10 guys on base. Again, not a hugely important game. Just disappointing that they weren't able to win this series against a bad team in the Tigers.
Yeah, game 3, Twins lose this one 5-2. Not a lot to write home about this one, Dan. I know that we'll talk about the start a little bit later in the episode. Not an enjoyable Sunday afternoon baseball game, especially you think they would bring it up a little bit, right? Because the Vikings played in the morning. People are looking for something to watch at noon.
But the funny thing was this game started early too. I mean, this game was like an 11 a.m. start or something like that. I think even Central Time. So yeah, you could roll right in from the Vikings game into that.
I mean, nothing's better than watching the Vikings play the Saints in London, going to see the Twins play the Tigers in Detroit. I mean, clearly those are on the same level, Dan.
Oh, absolutely. And good for the Vikings, by the way, for getting their win. Twins lose this one 5-2. I don't really think we need to say anything else about this one right now.
No, I'm done talking about these series, Dan. We have one more series left in the season, but let's get into the segments. And there's something that we need to do that I was just very sad that we couldn't talk about on Thursday when we had to cancel the episode, Dan.
Catch 'em all, Kirby Puckett!
Puckett's Picks winner.
I did wonder, David, if I was going to do this by myself, that was going to be a painful thing for me to have to express, that you had won Puckett's Picks now, because you have. That White Sox series, you had Arraez, he had 7 points. I had Miranda with 5. Correa had 1. Miranda did have a chance, if I remember back in the third game of that series, to knock in a couple runs. He was maybe, 20 feet short or something from hitting a home run there that would have kept me alive. But now, David, you have claimed victory. 19 now on the season. I have 16. And then the listeners, we decided just to kind of roll them. We rolled our picks into the next series. And the listeners won that one with Correa. So now they have 15 wins. So I guess the race is for second place here.
Well, it sounds a lot like this Twins team, Dan.
It does. And I want to hold them off. I want to win here. I want to have a good, solid 19-17 because, again, I'm going to run away with season points scored here. So
the funniest part about this, Dan, is that it's likely that I will finish with the least points scored, Dan.
That's true because you're 1 point behind the listeners. I'm 40 up on the listeners with 266. So I think you won this last year too, didn't you?
I did. Yeah. So now this will be the second season in a row, one away from a dynasty, Dan.
Well, it's going to take me a long time to unseat you. So there you go. Congratulations, David, for your victory.
Wonderful. Well, let's keep going here. Beast versus bench.
Beast versus bench.
Is losing fun? Is losing fun?
Now, Dan, I'm going to let you go first just because chronologically, the thing is, it's not really breaking the rules because we don't do this normally, but go ahead and give your beast, Dan.
Yeah. So Hoax teases me for picking pitchers for this. I'm picking a pitcher who literally didn't even appear in the Tigers series. I'm going back to the White Sox series, and I'm taking Bailey Ober for his Game 1 start against the White Sox.
Well done, Dan. Well done. I'm sure Hogs will be joining us for the season wrap-up, so I'm sure he'll have a couple of things to say about that.
But it was great. 10 strike. I mean, he had a great outing. It was 7+ innings. I mean, and truly, like, how encouraging if Bailey Ober, who is a giant of a person, right? He's 6'9", he's listed at 260 pounds. If he can play like that next season, lights out. I know he's playing against the White Sox team that's not very motivated, but come on, what a start from him.
Very good start, yes. I'm going to go with Correa. I think clearly he had the best play on the offensive side of the ball. And we're going to talk about Correa here in a couple of moments. But my goodness, Dan, that is a guy who I think is feeling a bit salty about his treatment from the Twins front office. But we'll get to that momentarily.
So for my bench, I'm going to go with Hilberto Celestino for one particular reason. And it was in Game 2 in the 8th inning. And Billy Hamilton is at third base trying to score the tying run, right? And up at the plate is Gary Sanchez, and Celestino on a 2-2 count just goes, but stops midway between second and third, kind of slows to a trot. And because he apparently thought that there was 3 balls in the count and that the outs or the inside pitch, wherever it was ball 4. But the funny thing was the Tigers didn't even throw. And on the radio cast, I think Gladden and Provis saying, well, maybe he was trying to maybe draw a throw so that Hamilton could score. I mean, come on. No, that is giving Hilberto
really
way too much credit.
Yes. Do you really think that Rocco would even give him the opportunity to do that? Can you imagine? Who seems like he's got his head on straight and who we could run a little trickery with? Let's run Hilberto Celestino out there and make it appear. This is a long con, Dan. This is a long con if I've ever seen one. They say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make sure the scouting report on Celestino is that he has no clue what's going on virtually ever. And then we're going to have him on the third ball, mind you, start trotting his way down to second base for this specific situation so that we might be able to score the run from third.
In the 5th to last game of the season when it's not meaningful, right? And how do you even send that sign to Hilberto if that's really the call? What do you do? Is that 2 tugs of the cap and then 1 rub of the right thigh? How is that sign given? I just wonder. But Hilberto got to second. It didn't matter. Sanchez ended up walking, I think, and then the Twins still screwed it up and hit into a double play, of course, and couldn't tie the game.
Hilberto Celestino, nicknamed Kaiser Söze.
All right. We're kind of in the same train here with yours. Who do you got?
Yeah, so I have Sanchez. My goodness, 0 for 10 with 4 strikeouts. He did have 3 walks, so it's hard to fault a guy if you get on base 3 times with walks, but 0 for 10 with 4 Ks just does it for me. Again, these will likely be the last 3 games that we see out of Gary Sanchez, but just imagine, Dan, how different the season could have gone if in that opening game he'd hit it out of the park in that last at-bat.
Changed the trajectory of the entire season right there, I think. And Dick Bramer would have gotten the call right, surely. Right? He would have been ready with that.
Deep to left field. Caught on the warning track.
All right, sir. Let's go ahead and go to Rocco's Rewind.
Rocco's Rewind.
Last episode, I was a bit sarcastic, and I kept the sarcasm going to such an extent that Dan got pretty annoyed with me. Hogs texted that he wasn't quite clear if I was in fact being sarcastic or not. But yes, I was being sarcastic. I did think that Rocco should be playing the guys who he's sitting. I mean, you might as well get your use out of them because it certainly seems like Correa won't be with this team next season. However, I will say in this series particularly, I did like especially the pitchers from the bullpen that Rocco used were guys who clearly are going to be vying for spots next season. And honestly, when you're playing these meaningless games, this is the best opportunity to see these guys against major league talent and to evaluate whether they're going to be meaningful additions to this team for next season.
I suppose we are calling the Tigers MLB talent. Is that what we're saying?
Quadruple A, I think is what they call it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think he's managing these losses well. That the Twins are trotting out lineups of all sorts here. It is nice. We're going to talk about Simeons, Woods, Richardson, and some other guys a little bit later. So I agree. It's nice to have.
Wonderful. What do you have for Rocco, Dan?
So I thought it was funny that Luis Arraez didn't play here in the third game of this Tigers series. It surely brought out a lot of Yankees fans all of a sudden on Twitter who apparently are following Twins beat writers all of a sudden here. Luis Arraez has it amounts to a 2-point lead right now in the AL batting race. He's got a 315 average. Aaron Judge has a 313. Bogaerts has fallen back to a 305. So it's really just down to Judge and Arraez. And I thought that was interesting. He has been hurt, right? You can make an argument that it's a legitimate decision to sit him.
It's not out of the norm, right? Like if Arraez was clearly an everyday player who they haven't really been giving consistent time off for, there would be more questions here. But yeah, this doesn't seem that crazy that he's on the bench. Now, do I think that's why they're sitting him in this particular instance? No, right. I don't really think that. And you can kind of see it. I don't love how many times the camera goes to Arraez when they talk about this, especially when he's not in the game. It's like,
Sure.
This is a little bit sketch.
Well, and two other things I want to say. First of all, he's been on, a 7 or 8 game hitting streak? I mean, he's playing well here at the end to hold off Judge. To pass Judge. He was behind him for a little while there. Also, it harkens back. Do you remember when Terry Francona predicted that Luis Arraez would someday win a batting title?
The only reason I remember that, Dan, is because I swear you say that about every third episode. Anytime Arraez is the beast or has a good series, well, do you remember anytime a guy like Terry Francona says something about a guy, you know that he's doing something right. That was like my worst Dan Thompson voice ever, but like I'm sick.
Am I a smoker right now, David? That's what I sounded like there. All right, well let's keep going because you wanted to talk more about Arraez.
Minnesota moment.
Yeah, the only thing I want to say for my Minnesota moment here is that sitting Arraez in this moment for, again, what I'm pretty sure is just protecting his current average is classic Minnesota passive aggressiveness. So we may bicker about whether Rocco is really one of us, but my goodness, is there anything more Minnesotan than passive aggressiveness, Dan?
I mean, if they're going to beat the Yankees, this is how they're going to do it, right? With passive aggressiveness. They're not going to beat them straight up. This is the way.
Is there a larger contrast between New York in your face and Minnesotan passive aggressiveness? Like that'd be a pretty funny skit if you showed like the same situation with a Minnesotan and a New Yorker and how they handle those things. It's the same thing in baseball, Dan.
Well, here, I guess we should give Luis Arraez's seemingly final line then for the season. So 142 games. He had 542 at-bats, 171 hits, 8 homers, 49 RBI, and a 315 average, which that's a pretty dang good average these days. It's no Joe Mauer line, but it's pretty dang good for 2022.
We don't have time, Dan. We don't have time. What's your Minnesota moment?
So the debut of Simeon Woods Richardson, who, let me say, and I think we all said this on our chat, the jersey is hilarious. It's like they increased the font size, though, to accentuate how long his name is. It's like a circle on the back of his jersey, Kufus.
It almost does a full circle, which would be hilarious.
Right.
When does it start and when does it stop? Nobody knows.
And the other thing about it to me is Simeon Woods Richardson was one of the guys that they got back in the Jose Barrios deal. Now they've already got Joe Ryan from the Nelson Cruz deal. So if Simeon Woods Richardson could be a great starting pitcher for them, maybe a 2 or a 3 level guy, what a great return. He pitched pretty well here in Game 3, 5 innings, 3 hits, 3 runs, but 2 of them were earned, 2 walks, 3 strikeouts. That's really an encouraging line and a good way for him to go into the offseason, I think.
I don't think that he'll factor in next season unless we see the sort of injury massacre that we saw this season.
Sure. And so, yes, and he's only, 22 years old. He's the youngest pitcher, I think, to pitch this league. So this year. So hopefully it's 2 years out we're talking about, but he has this experience so that he's got that at least under his belt.
Well, and hopefully by then we have a nickname for him. Like, because I think we could call him Swar, but I don't know if people would be on board with that.
It was really, trying to say Woods Richardson there was very difficult.
Say it 5 times fast. But no, I mean, even if we did call him SWR, somebody's come up with something clever. I don't know. We're tired. It's late. So one of the listeners, tweet us with what you think Simeon Woods Richardson's nickname ought to be. If he already has one, tell us. If he doesn't, throw out some options for us.
All right, well, let's go to Mauer's musings.
I just don't know how it can get any better.
Mauer's musings.
I guess I'll start here with the Correa question. This was, the previous series, but he was asked about his contract, and he gave this quote. And David, I'm going to read you the quote, and then I'm going to tell you how I felt kind of throughout this quote. So he says, "When I go to the mall and I go to the Dior store, I don't know what that is, and I want something, I get it. I ask how much it costs, and I buy it. So if you really want something, you just go get it." Now, David, when he started down this metaphor about this store that I don't know, and he said, "I want something, I get it," I thought he was going to say, because I already have millions and millions of dollars, and money doesn't matter to me, and I would love to stay in Minnesota for the rest of my life and have lots of children here and retire here and have my number 4 retired by the Minnesota Twins. That's what I thought that was going to happen after that. But instead we get this distancing. I felt very like, I didn't feel the love from Correa in this line. Did you?
No, I think it's clear what happened. Correa's can't put forth a number and said, this is what it would take to sign me. And the Twins just were like, ha, 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 ha. We're the Twins.
Like, we don't do that? Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
basically?
more like, are you insane? Like, truly, that's how I think it happened. And Scott Boras is his agent. And so he's known to be, very hard-nosed and definitely works hard to get the best for his clients. So I just don't know. I have to think, yes, this is what happened. They dropped a number. And what's disappointing is that maybe this is a negotiation tactic. Like, remember how stressed we were about Buxton in the offseason, whether the Twins were going to sign him? Is this a similar feel? Where, like, we kind of thought, well, maybe Buxton's going to walk, but, like, maybe it was negotiation.
That is possible. But here's the other line that bothered me, and I guess this is actually a Jose Miranda quote, but he said about Correa that Correa was like, hey, you've got no options. You're going to Houston to work with me in this offseason. And I don't like that. Like, come on, Carlos, you can't like string along Miranda and say, oh yeah, we're going to be best buddies and then sign elsewhere. Like, these are the mixed messages that I feel like we're getting in this Correa courtship that's just very confusing. And I know that he's trying to be a great ball player, great leader on the team, and I get all that. Championship culture.
And build championship culture.
But like, can't you just say, I want to be here and whatever, we'll make it happen?
I think that makes it a stronger possibility that this is part of negotiation and less how he's actually like feeling.
Well, Hogs is like, he went from 100% in to now like 0%. So,
well, Hogs is very much a man of extremes. Like, he's not, Hogs isn't one to like take a balanced approach.
Well, he's going to get to defend himself on that, I guess, in a couple episodes here with our season wrap. How about you? What is your musing?
So Jeffers returned from the IL, and really, it seems to me when we're looking at Twins shopping lists, depending on what happens with the shortstop position, do you think that Jeffers could still be an everyday starter next season? Or do you think his chances have now sailed and he's going to be relegated to the backup role?
That's a really good question, because it's like the catching position was terribly disappointing on this team. They couldn't throw guys out. They didn't seem to add a ton to the pitching staff. I know that part of their job is a little bit harder for us to kind of track. They certainly didn't hit great. There were so many times we talked about how we'd rather have Sandy Leon back there catching, because at least he does the other things well. I think that they're probably going to give him a chance, but I also wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility that they bring in somebody. They maybe even throw a lot of money at a catcher, because Jeffers is just terribly unproven still after a full season.
Especially if they don't sign Correa and they got an extra boatload of money to spend.
That's totally true. But again, catching is hard. Like, it's hard to get that catcher like a Joe Mauer. Like, you're just there. There's generational talents out there, David, that you take for granted when they're here, and then you roll your eyes about them when they're gone.
That's 2 on the episode, Dan.
Do I get one more? I'll see if I can get one more in here.
Well, with that, Dan, let's go ahead and grade this very, very meaningful series.
Series grades.
David, again, I'm going to harken back to that White Sox series because I want to pull that in here for my grade. I'm going to say they went 3-3 during the stretch of meaningless baseball games. If anything, the 2 against the White Sox were a little bit more meaningful, so I'm going to say a C over that stretch.
I'm going to give them a D. I just have a hard time. Like, even if they sweep the series, it's hard to give them an A knowing the context of the series. Like, I know we're trying to grade things within, like, the series itself, but it's a D. You lost 2 of 3 to the Tigers, and they're not even trying. So if you can not try the Tigers, that's embarrassing.
When you say it like that, I think I'd have to agree with you.
All right, well, let's go to Herbie's headlines because we have some interesting things to talk about, Dan, including a very fun note about your hometown Mariners.
I don't know, Jack. It looked like Herbeck pulled him off the bag.
Herbie's headlines.
Hometown is kind of in quotation marks there, Coop. It's
like
4 hours away.
I guess I should say your relocated geographical team preference.
Yeah, I mean, it would be like, if somebody moved to Brainerd, right, and then it adopted the Twins as a fan. Like, I guess because they're there, right? Because there's nobody else around. It is cool.
Yeah, you're making it sound like you had options, Dan. Like, I guess if you were cheering for some Canadian team in Vancouver, in the Canadian Baseball League.
Anyway, the Mariners did. They clinched. It was a cool play. Cal Raleigh hit a home run down the right field line in a full count in a tie game in the bottom of the 9th inning. So good on the Mariners. It's been 21 seasons. And the funny thing is, I remember when they went to the playoffs last time because I was actually looking at coming out here for college in 2001, and they had that great season season with Ichiro, with Edgar, and so many of these great guys. So it is pretty cool. They love their baseball out here. It's so good on the Mariners. I hope they can win a series here and keep the season going.
I am surprised, Dan, that I had to add this next one into the notes.
Okay, are you talking about Aaron Judge tying the record?
Of course I'm talking about Aaron Judge.
Okay, I was trying to, because we were talking before, I had written in what I thought were all the best ideas into my side of the spreadsheet, so I thought I needed to leave something for you, Kufa. So how about you go ahead and talk about Aaron Judge?
No, I refuse. You talk about
Aaron
Aaron
Judge tied the record here, the Maris record, so he's got 61 home runs, but here's the thing, he's only got, 3 games left, and he's still sitting on it. Do you think they're getting nervous in New York?
I bet so. Their last series will be against the Texas Rangers, Dan. I mean, the ball flies in that hot air, right? That's what Mark McGwire told me.
It does, but they got that enclosed stadium now. Go figure, of all the places to go. I guess good on the Rangers here for being able to sell some tickets here at the end of the season.
That's true, right? Honestly, that's really funny that you say that, but that's probably accurate. I bet they see more fans there than they've seen since the All-Star break.
Oh, probably. So, again, I'm in the boat where I hope that he does it. Do you want him to break it? Do you want him to sit there at 61? Do you have a preference?
It's like I'm actively rooting against him because he's a Yankee, but I think it's really cool, especially if it turns out that he was clean this whole time. Like, it's just hard because his body size was so huge to begin with that, it's hard not to think that he's clean, right? Like, that's the big thing. And so, Roger Maris, I'm not trying to make, clearly there wasn't steroid use in that particular individual, but you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
Like from a baseball history perspective, yes, I'm kind of cheering for him. I just hate that he's playing for the Yankees. And the way that you adore him, Dan, just makes it very difficult for me to hop on that train. We can't have both of us cheering on a Yankee on a Twins podcast, and it doesn't work.
Well, okay, that is fair. I do wonder, are we just still so jaded by that steroids era? I mean, that was a long time ago now, and they're catching guys a lot more obviously now. The Twins have had guys getting caught before too, so I hope he does it. We'll see though. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he just sat there at 61.
So 2 other quick notes. Tony La Russa is to retire. Not super surprising. The guy clearly hasn't seemed like he's been mentally with it for quite some time, and the fact that the White Sox played much better when he went on leave probably didn't help his case for coming back next season.
Well, and this is something we can probably talk about next series too, but it does make you really question what, the White Sox with all of this talent, and they bring La Russa in, and they're not even, they might finish 500. I mean, some people predicted they win 95 to 100 games this year, and they're just nowhere near that pace.
And to be fair, the Twins struggled with injuries towards the end of the season. The White Sox struggled mightily at the beginning of the season. When both rosters are healthy, I see a lot of guys on Twins Twitter, soon as this team is healthy, we're going to come out with a vengeance. It's I get that, yes, we have had a lot of injuries on this team, but to pretend as though the White Sox didn't deal with similar amounts of injuries to key players throughout the season would be foolish. And I think you need to start reevaluating that this White Sox team, I think it's funny that we could beat them this season, but I don't think we can just be oh yeah, clearly this is how it'll go next season.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's going to be an interesting race in the Central because I think that these 3 teams are still going to be very much in it. And we talked about the Tigers before the season. Who knows? Maybe they'll be able to turn it around just a little bit next season too.
So last note here, Ohtani, who is currently an arbitration eligible player. So if you don't understand arbitration, basically that's a player who's not a free agent, still under team control, but the player can basically not sue the team, but for lack of a better word, they're suing the team for how much they believe they're owed for their contract for the following season. And Ohtani was awarded the largest arbitration contract in MLB history of $30 million for next season, Dan.
And that's funny because we see so much about, the wins above replacement and how that correlates to dollars. And we've seen that with Buxton's deal, and we're hearing about that with Correa's deal. You would think he's worth more than $30 million for as much as he plays for that team. But it's such a fascinating process. And the Twins are going to have guys. I mean, look at Luis Arraez is not making much money. Jose Miranda's not making much money. The Twins are going to have to face these kinds of cases, I suppose you would think, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, that was always the problem with Buxton, too. When they went to the negotiating table, it's Buxton would be well, hey, look at these stats. And the Twins would be yeah, but you were on the field for 8 games last season.
Yeah, so it worked out for the Twins, right, to have a pretty, I think, fair deal with Buxton. And we'll see kind of how this shakes out for Ohtani over the next couple of years. And we'll see how this shakes out with Carlos Correa here as soon as he presumably opts out of this deal.
All right, well, let's go on here to make our Puckett's picks for the final time this season, Dan.
And we'll see you tomorrow night.
Puckett's picks.
Well, the listeners, Dan, are going to take Correa. No real surprise there. I mean, clearly this guy he's either performing well out of spite or performing well to get more money out of the Twins or a different team. I'm not sure which.
So this leaves me with everybody else. And again, the same question is like, who really wants it? Who's playing? You know what? What the heck? Jake Cave. I'll just go with Jake Cave.
Oh, no.
Let's
You
go
can't
out with
make
a bang
troll
here.
pick. I was going to make a troll pick.
I'm making it. I'm taking Jake Cave.
Well, hang on. Now I have to figure out who I want.
You can have
to take.
Hilberto. You want Hilberto? I bet they'll
I
both
don't
play.
want Hilberto. Like, that's not even a troll. It's just too sad to think about. I guess I'm trying to think Palacios would be a funny one. Contreras would be pretty
Caleb
entertaining.
Hamilton, maybe?
No, get Billy Hamilton. I'm going to take Billy. No, I will take Jose Miranda. He's been my boy. He's won a lot for me this season. When we do the wrap up, I will do a breakdown of how many times each player was picked by each individual.
Okay.
Who has the best winning record. Now, keep in mind, folks, I don't keep stats for every player on the team who was not picked. So this is strictly based upon who was actually picked by the listeners, by Dan or myself. So it's not like I can go back and figure out who had the best season or who would have won the most series, because I just don't have that sort of time, Dan.
Maybe there's a listener out there who wants to do that for us.
That would be remarkable. I mean, granted, I don't know. I don't want to think about it. It's too much effort to think about in my mind to be building formulas like that, Dan.
Don't you do that all day? You build spreadsheets for a living.
That's fair. But I also get paid to do that, Dan. That's the other issue here.
All right, David. Well, I'll save your voice here. It's held up really well throughout the episode, but I'll go ahead and send us out. Folks, if you like what you hear, please tell a friend. You can follow us on Twitter at Min for the Win. You can find our Min for the Win Facebook page. You can also find us on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so you're notified when new episodes are available. And if you could leave us a rating or a like, that would be great. Thanks for listening. And as always, go Twins.
That'll wrap up another episode of Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, go Twins.